We start off this afternoon with Monsignor Gerard O'Connor. He's going to speak to us about a Eucharistic Parish. Monsignor is the Director of Office of Worship for the Archdiocese of Portland, but he's a priest for the priest from Massachusetts, and he was ordained in the Great Jubilee year of 2000 on July 22nd. His curriculum vitae is enormous and extensive. Probably would be able to speak at any conference almost anywhere in the world and be one of the experts in anything pertaining to the church. He worked for the Congregation of Clergy in Rome and was made a chaplain to His Holiness in March of 2005. He holds a very rare doctorate degree of sacred liturgy from the Pontifical Liturgical Institute in Rome. But before that, he had an extensive academic career as well, getting an MBA in corporate finance and having a degree in science before that. In addition to his extensive work for the Vatican and his academic work as getting his doctorate, he served as a pastor of St. Francis Parish in Massachusetts, where he was also the pastor of a parish with a school. Recently, he's formulated an extensive, groundbreaking work of a handbook for the Archdiocese in liturgical norms and practices. It basically is a textbook that hopefully will be integrated into seminary formation, and it's jaw-dropping that work was put together in the midst of his pastoral work and then also his work as the Director of Liturgy. And so I just ask you to really welcome and thank Monsignor Gerard for this extremely valuable gift of his time with us, for one, but then also the work that he's doing in promoting an authentic liturgical reform focused on Eucharistic parishes.
Well, good afternoon. I certainly think that this conference is certainly biased towards the extraordinary form, and that's not a good thing. And to feel those of us that are really in the realm of the ordinary form, I'd like to make you feel at home now. So please stand and greet the person next to you before we... And then we're going to do birthdays, okay? As Father Theo said, I'm a priest of the Diocese of Fall River in Massachusetts, but I'm originally from England, from the north of England, from Yorkshire, hence the outrageous accent. And this is absolutely true. About an hour ago, I was in my room preparing some final notes here, and the knock at the door, housekeeping. So I went to the door and I said, "No, thank you." And she said, "You don't want me today?" I said, "No." I said, "Do you need anything else?" And I said, "No, thank you." I was about to close the door and I said, "You know what? I'll take some water if you have some." And she looked at me and said, "What?" I said, "I'll take some water, please." And she said, "What is water?" I had to say, "Agua. Por favor, agua." She couldn't understand my accent. Outrageous, isn't it? So these are the sort of things, challenges I have in my life. Last year's conference, so we're changing the tack of things a little bit here because I sort of self-described, I'm an applied liturgist, if you like. Obviously, I did my doctoral work, and it went last year when Dr. Bissonnette said to me, "Will you come and talk?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "What do you want me to talk about?" She said, "Well, why don't you talk about your doctoral thesis, which is the source of the orations of the Paris Missal of 1738. And I said, "Oh no, you don't want that." There's only two men that have read that whole thing and are alive to talk about it. One is Father Cassian Folsom, who was my doctoral professor. So we're not going to talk about that. We're going to move from the realm of sort of theory into application. And before I start that, I want to sort of give you an idea about a few things I think are happening in society and in liturgy that sort of to have a look through this lens. If you see what's happening in liturgy, I think it's happening in the world. Bishop Vasher gave an excellent talk last year, and he based it on an article written by Father Thomas Buffer. And basically, not to repeat any of this, but for those of you who didn't listen to it, it really was a great talk. He said one of the problems with the liturgical movement in North America was this, is that it was so aligned with the social justice movement that it took many of the traits that were being pushed by the social justice warriors, SJWs as they're known, and tried to integrate it into the application of the Second Vatican Council's document on liturgy and the subsequent documents, etc. So one of the things, or the things that come out of that, is this idea of active participation, or the false application of active participation, worship as a social activity, and the end of worship as something personal. Worship is socially transformative. So this is the idea that Father Buffer posited, and Bishop Vasher gave this great talk on. And it's a wonderful way to look at things. If you're concerned or if you're interested in the application of liturgy as we stand, think about what is happening in the world and think about the social justice movement as aligned to the American liturgical movement. It's quite a frightening thing when you think about it. The ALM wanted to eliminate, this is Father Buffer and Bishop Vasher, wanted to eliminate individualism. And they see it as an enemy, obviously, of social justice, but they see it also as an enemy of liturgy as well. There's a great thinker around now, Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson, who you've probably seen and read. He's been quoted as one of the most influential thinkers of today. He's not a Christian. He describes himself as a deist, but he's got some wonderful thoughts about this. And if you're interested in the sort of commentary about society right now, he's probably one of the greatest commentators. He's a clinical psychologist. There's a beautiful interview that you can see on YouTube where he's being interviewed by a rather cheeky English interviewer, and she's trying to get the upper hand, etc., and whatever. And at some point she says, "What gives you the right to say that?" And he looks at her and says, "I'm a clinical psychologist." And she just shuts up, because what can you say? His job is to commentate on social behavior and attitudes. So I'm going to start using that in the future when people say to me, what gives you the right? I say, "I'm a liturgist." Fair enough. Carry on. But Jordan Peterson will say this about the left wing. He'll just say the left want to eliminate the individual. They want to move towards a group identity. Everybody's got to identify as a group. And the individualism expression of a person is to be devalued, basically. That is what's going on in society, he says. And when you think about that, we can apply that to the church as well. We can apply that to the liturgy. Not saying that one form of the rite is more individual, but we see, do we not, this idea in certain applications of liturgical practice is that we've got to be all together. We've got to be identified in groups and not in individuals, and not identified with the church as such, other groups. So Bishop Vasher ended his talk like this. And because this link of social justice and the link of the liturgical movement means this: a communion rail means you don't care about the poor. Bishop Vasher's words. That's what they think, right? That's what they think about those who have a piety which expresses something which is not acceptable in today's world. And it's funny because in the Archdiocese of Portland, we've started to implement some changes. And one of those was, as of the 3rd of June, that the faithful in the Archdiocese of Portland will kneel after the Agnus Dei. This is a practice throughout the world. It's 80% of the diocese in America, but it was not practiced here for 20 years. Archbishop Sample said, in our move for more reverent celebration of liturgy, this would be a good thing to do. So he decided he'd do it. Well, we didn't get a lot of pushback, but I remember one particular nasty letter to the Archbishop saying, "Why are you doing this?" And the letter said, in summary, "How is this going to feed the poor?" This is what we're dealing with, because we cannot associate these two things. They're either or. you want to get involved in these silly little liturgical rules about kneeling and standing and having tabernacles in places and all this sort of stupid stuff, but it's not doing anything for the social justice warriors. It is not feeding the poor. And I think Archbishop Sample's homily on Monday, if you heard that, was getting at this. It's not either or, it's both and. But this is a sort of attitude that's out there when we start talking about liturgical practice in an environment where for 20-odd years we've had a laxity, if you like. So my view on this is, we spend more time and effort disobeying these great rules that are given to us by the Church in her wisdom of piety and reverence. We spend more effort not doing them when it's so easy to do them. And let's do them, and then let's see the results of what happens when you do these things. And that's my talk today, really, about my own experience in a parish of making it into a Eucharistic parish, transforming it, transfiguring it into a parish that is centered upon the Eucharist. Because we can talk about the extraordinary form, the ordinary form, but the one thing that binds all this together is our Lord in the Most Holy Eucharist and how we behave before the Holy Eucharist. And so that's more or less what I'll be talking about today. Another thing that goes in a sort of general look at what's happened to society and the Church, there's a wonderful book called The Decline and Fall of the Catholic Church by David Carlin. He's actually a politician from Massachusetts. He's a Catholic, of course, but he's not trained in theology, but he's a politician. I think he was a state rep or something. And he's got this great book, and he talks about the statistics. As a layman, and he just says, this is the situation, particularly in Massachusetts. This is what has happened to us. And he says, the problem is this. He said, we have had 30 years of generic Christianity. We have had 30 years of when you go to Holy Mass, you will hear the same old stories about Jesus loves you, all going to work out, something will turn up, it always does. All these bland sort of Anglican homilies about Stradivarius and his string breaking during an orchestra practice and, things like that. And he says, this is the problem. Because what we've not done over the last 30 years is stick with what we know as Catholics, what we have as Catholics, what we value most dear as Catholics. And he says, one of those is the Most Holy Eucharist. When was the last time you went to Mass and you heard a good homily about the Eucharist? When was the last time you went to Mass and you were told that you should start the Saturday devotions? When did you go to Mass last when someone told you about the month of the Sacred Heart? All these things, he says, are unique to us as Catholics. And the more we move away from that and get to that realm of generic Christianity, we have nothing to offer the world. Because our most prized, most beloved possession is our Lord Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. And if we don't mention him, we don't talk about him, then, we're just like the rest. He goes on to say that when you think about it, we have a lot of bad sermons in the Catholic Church. And I'm guilty. I've given a few bad sermons in my time. I won't deny that. But I do agree with him that we have got to strive to talk about the things that are unique to our faith and the things that are most important to our faith, the things that have given us those men and women who have been martyred for our faith over the years. The other stuff is not any good to us. Because of the fact that when you go to a Protestant service, the sermon is the center of that service. For us, the center of our service is the Eucharist. That's why Protestants are better at preaching, because that's all they've got, right? And we as Catholic priests are a bit sloppy because we know we've got the Eucharist. And that's why people come back again and again. It's not to hear my story about the kitten in a box or whatever it is. So, it is the Eucharist that is the center of our lives as Catholics. Source and summit, the quotes, etc. So my theory is we get back to preaching, teaching, forming about the Eucharist, we have got a chance of restoring the liturgy. So that's my way. We can say, well, we can just restore the liturgy here and everybody will. No, I think if we teach about the Eucharist, it's natural that people will be more reverent, more respectful, more prayerful. And I've seen it happen in a parish, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But this process has got to be gradual. It is not going to happen overnight. And we were talking at the dinner table the other night and said, well, it'd be great, let's all go back to 1962 and all our problems will be over. Let's just let's chant instead of OCP at Mass. Every problem will be over. I'm sorry, it's not going to be over, It's not. This has got to be a gradual progression, and it's got to start with each of us in our own prayer lives, and then in our parishes, and then in our dioceses, our country, etc. I had a friend of mine who took over a new parish a few years ago, and the tabernacle was somewhat awkwardly placed to the left of the sanctuary. That sort of parish, that just for no reason. It's just there instead of here, And he said, one of the first things I wanted to do was move the tabernacle back. He said, but everybody's like, don't move anything in your first 6 months or your first year and all that sort of stuff. So he was a young priest, didn't want to cause any problems, so he didn't. What he did do, though, was every week he moved the tabernacle an inch. And guess what? No one noticed and no one complained. True story. Another one of these was that my dean was in the parish next to me, and I'd moved my presider's chair, which I hate that word presider because a priest once told me it was, Pontius Pilate that presided at Calvary, and we shouldn't use it. But anyway, I'd moved my presider's chair instead of facing the people to liturgical north. And so the dean came to do a confirmation, and he had to sit in the presider's chair, and he didn't like the fact that he wasn't facing the people, So during Mass, this is the thing. So if I went into someone else's parish and I moved their tabernacle to the center, guess what would happen to me? I'd be sent away for some time of reflection. But the dean came to my parish, and in the middle of Mass, before he sat down after the opening prayer, he turned the chair around and sat facing the people, with the servers all facing north. It was the strangest thing you've ever seen. So while he was giving the homily, I sent one of the altar boys over and said, turn that chair around. And he did. And when Monsignor came back, he sort of looked at me and went, and just sat in the chair. Yeah. Anyway, that's the chair tabernacle approach, I call. It's a technical term. But it means that we've got to do this gradually, and we've got to do it without too much fuss and without too much sort of conflict. But it can be done. So, running a parish. So this is for priests, but anybody that's concerned in parish life. Because most of us, all of you really, are members of parishes that are normal, average American parishes that use OCP, that are using the ordinary form, etc., right? So my idea here is how we put the Eucharist in those parishes at the center of their lives, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But two things I always say. Success in a parish is about good preaching and about the Eucharist. Good preaching, good liturgy, basically. If you've got those two things are going to go well for you because your people will convert. If you can preach well and if you have good liturgy, it's done. That's the secret to running a good parish. You don't have those, you're going to be in trouble. So, I took over a parish about 10 years ago. And as I say, it's average sort of parish average parish in Acushnet in Massachusetts. Had a school. School was doing okay. Parish was sort of failing a bit. They were talking about merging it with the parish next door, which was unusual because it was sort of in a town by itself. There was no other parish there. And, so I went there and, just a couple of silly things that this may be obvious to some of you, but some of you will say, wow, yeah, we shouldn't do that, So I went in and said, okay, well, we've got to change a few things right away, The first thing we looked at was our church was locked all the time. Just closed. They had morning mass 4 days a week at 9 o'clock. And at 9:30, the church was locked and closed. And the parish priest said, well, it's a security issue, isn't it? And I said, oh, yeah. The police station's just across the road. It's really... And then the fire station's next to that, and the mayor's department is next to that. I said, yeah, security. We had a lot of drive-by... No, we didn't, actually. We had drive... I mean, there was just no crime in Acushnet. So this idea that we've got to keep our churches locked is unbelievable. Keep the churches open, keep the parish office closed if necessary. Let's keep our church. So this is the first thing. Keep your churches open. People will come. If you open them, they will come, right? It just happened. So we did this day 1 or 2. Just keep the church. So you have the old guard that's been there for 20 years, say like, oh no, we knew, you shouldn't do that. People are going to be, what? It's a Acushnet. The police are right over the, there's no security issue here. I understand we've got some parishes in the inner city where there are problems. But with creative thinking and some security cameras, you can overcome them as well. But fundamentally, the church is a house of prayer, right? It is there not for those 25 minutes 4 times a week. It is there to bring our communities together before the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, in the tabernacle. And I'll talk about that later because adoration played a big part in this. What we did immediately as well is said that we will close the office during Mass. Our staff will not be working in the office when Mass is going on. You will be upstairs in the church for Mass too. Makes a lot of sense. If you're going to put the Eucharist at the center of the parish life, everything stops for Holy Mass, right? The office closes. No one's coming in. The phones can ring as much as they like, but everyone goes up to Mass. These simple things, opening the church, putting the Mass at the center of the parish life each day, was very important to us. And guess what? Started having an effect. One of the things, as we talk about parish staff as well, is that all of the staff in your parish and in your school must be on board. They must believe what we believe as Catholics. They must be living that life or on a path to conversion. Because you will never succeed in all these things I'm about to talk about if you have dissenters, if you like, or people that are not on fire with the faith. You start changing your staff, your personnel, with people who are on fire with the Catholic faith, you will change your parish. It just goes without saying. You will change your school as well if you start employing Catholics rather than educators. It's nice when they're Catholic educators, yes, but the emphasis should be on Catholic rather than educator. And we made that as a choice in our parish, in our school as well. So the staff must be Catholic. And you can decide that, obviously. I'm not sure about discrimination laws nowadays, but if someone's coming for a job in a Catholic parish, you can ask them about their practice of their faith life, etc. You can call their parish priest to find out if they do go to church, that sort of stuff. The other thing we said in the management of our parish was the leadership must be on fire with the faith. The leaders in any ministry or apostolate in the parish must be on fire with the faith. Not just they go to Mass on Sundays, most of the time. They've got to be leaders in the faith. You've got to pick out in your parish those who are absolutely on fire, in love with Jesus Christ. Not lukewarm Catholics leading other lukewarm Catholics. Lukewarm Catholics produce lukewarm Catholics. On fire Catholics produce saints. So there's the other thing. All the leadership in the parish and school, we've got to replace. Well, we didn't have to replace a lot, but we had to look at key things and say we need to replace that with someone who's totally on fire with this. And again, starts changing. The whole apostolates, they all start changing all of a sudden because you've got leaders that can talk about the faith and they can enthuse and they can excite people about the faith. It goes without saying, when I walked in our faith formation department, we had people that were in irregular marriages teaching faith formation, people that didn't go to Mass on Sunday teaching faith formation, which is beyond belief as far as I'm concerned. You want to come and teach kids their faith on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. but you will not come to Mass. It's astonishing that you could let that happen over a period of years. So that had to stop. And it did stop, of course, And I'm not sort of saying, well, I just went into this parish and fired everybody. There's a funny story. I did actually fire someone after day 3, but she sort of like fired herself, I think. I'm not sure how that worked out. I did get a bit of a reputation with that one. Anyway, I'm not saying fire people. I'm saying call them to conversion, of course. And if they can't come to that conversion that is necessary for living the gospel life, then they must decide that they shouldn't set themselves up in leadership positions in the parish or the Catholic Church. And again, this is one of the big problems that we've had over the last 30, 40 years, is that we've had leaders in positions that are not committed to the faith, and perhaps even, you won't believe this, disagree with the Catholic Church on many issues, mainly moral ones. I had a buddy who was a priest in Nebraska, Omaha, not the good diocese, and he's great. He was in charge of, I think they made him a president of a school, and they were interviewing for a new principal of a high school. A religious sister came to interview for the job, a little panel interview, and she was obviously not probably on board with all the things that he would be. And it came to him in his questions, and he said, "Sister, are there any things you disagree with that the Catholic Church teaches?" And she said, "Oh, yes, lots." And he said, "No further questions." And that was it. She didn't get the job. But we've got to get back to that. We've got to get to the point where the people in leadership positions in our parishes, I could say diocese and the wider church, but certainly in our parishes, are on fire Catholics. That's it. Certainly, call people to conversion. Give them the incentive to convert. But if they can't, they cannot lead the parish. Mass attendance is key to it all, and it's got to be a focus for everything you do in the parish. You've got to be telling people, you've got to let people know they must attend Holy Mass, because not attending Holy Mass has this knock-on effect, this compound effect of sin that spreads through the parish. This attitude that we can be blasé about our Mass attendance is endemic in most parishes. And even the priests will say silly things like, "Oh, yeah, you'll be fine. You were busy," this sort of stuff. No, that attitude is, to miss Holy Mass is a grave sin. And I know we don't like talking about grave sin anymore, but it's a reality that we must get over to our people, that Mass is the center of our lives as Catholics. And to miss Mass is a grave sin. So let us start with that. Let us say that Mass attendance is the most important thing. And if you've got parish members of staff, you've got teachers, you've got apostolate leaders that have that blasé attitude towards Mass, or their families, or they have these very weak excuses not to go to Mass, which you'll find a lot, which is, we're busy on Sundays because I've got to take Johnny to soccer, and then we've got lacrosse, and then Mary's got dance class, she's got ballet. No offense, Magdalene. But, you've got all these things going on and these weak excuses, whereas we've got to turn that whole thing around as absolutely nothing comes before Holy Mass. It is the center of our lives as Catholics. And if we can't get that right, the other stuff is no good to us. Because by not attending Mass, we commit mortal sin. We commit grave sin. So this attitude of Mass attendance, or allowing our people to understand that Mass attendance is key to it all, is very important in your parish and in the leadership of the parish. There are certain things about the Holy Eucharist which can change sort of immediately. You priests, it starts with you. When you're in the church, your posture, your gestures around the Holy Eucharist will make all the difference to your people. If they see you genuflecting properly, if they see you go down on one knee and bow your head and say a prayer as you pass before the tabernacle, they will know that something is different here. If you give that sort of curtsy to a minor royal, that get down on your knee, man, man up, but this whole sort of attitude of laxity towards the Blessed Sacrament spreads through the parish, right? I will go to a parish, and within 5 minutes, the way people behave in front of the Blessed Sacrament, I'll tell you what your priest is like. It starts with you, fathers. It starts with you. If we don't get this right, we can't tell our people. But if you do get it right, hey, guess what? All of a sudden, people start having this beautiful reverence towards the Blessed Sacrament. They know what to do. They know when to genuflect. They know to kneel down if the tabernacle's open. This is another, I digress on this one, of course, but, this idea that everybody's got a key to the tabernacle is frightening. The priest is the only one that should go to the tabernacle, unless there are extreme circumstances, which usually are not in your average parish. But the idea that every Tom, Dick, and Harry is at the tabernacle every 5 minutes is just, craziness. All these things come together to show our great reverence and love for the Eucharist. They're simple things, but they make a massive difference. In the presence of the Most Holy Eucharist in church, we talked about silence. Someone talked about silence today. Silence is something that we've lost out on a lot. But when we're in the Eucharistic presence, in the tabernacle or exposed, we need to be quiet. We need to be before the Lord in prayer. Nothing else. The deportment that we have before the Blessed Sacrament, how we, walk, how we get to a place before the Blessed Sacrament, all these silly things you may think, they're important because these signs, these postures, these gestures point to that reality that we as Catholics believe that is our Lord and God, body, blood, soul, and divinity. That is our brother, that is our Savior, that is our judge. That's who's present in the Eucharist. Not just some sort of holy bread in a box. The way we behave around the Blessed Sacrament has this huge knock-on effect for the whole parish. Starts with priests, but then the laity understand. All these other things that go with it. My altar servers, I was one of those parishes, one of those awful parishes that only had altar boys. And I didn't change that immediately. I had to wait until Easter the following year, but I changed that, and that had a huge effect. When I arrived, I had like a dozen boys and girls that were sloppy and wearing albs and flip-flops and earrings and things like this. And that was just the boys. So I changed up and said, we're just going to go to boys, right? And I lost some parishioners over that. I did, they just thought it was sexist. And my DRE was one of them. I didn't lose her. She was a great woman, and she stayed with me for the rest of the time. But she came to me and said, look, my boy is a server right now, and my girl is coming up, and all she wants to do is be an altar server, and now you've ruined it for her. I'm like, you know what? Let's just stick with me on this one, and you'll. The first day at Easter, I think it was Easter week, the first day we moved to altar servers, 10 boys turned up for Mass. They were in cassocks and surplices. And without me knowing, they'd lined up in the entrance of the church by height. I don't know why. They were wearing black shoes, black trousers, black socks, this sort of stuff. They looked brilliant. Well, my DRE stood next to me before Mass starts, and she's crying like a schoolgirl. And she looks at me and she says, oh, you were right. I said, yeah, because her son was one of them, and she just thought this was the best thing ever. It changes things about how people serve. Now, I'm not saying that everybody can go to all boy servers and things like this, but we started a real training session for the boys, and they knew how to serve, and they knew how to behave themselves in the sanctuary. I never had to tell one of my boys in 10 years to stop talking in the sanctuary. They would never dream of doing that while they're on the altar, I go out now with the Archbishop. I'm going to all sorts of places, and kids are chewing gum, chatting, laughing, playing with their iPhones during Mass. I'm like, it's crazy. But everybody who's up there, congregation sees their reverence to the Blessed Sacrament, and guess what? It flows back. So these things are important too. Even to the point of my altar boys didn't receive communion in the hand. And the reason why I said that, I asked them not to do that. I didn't ask them. I told them they weren't going to do it. And I say told because demand is a pejorative word, I suppose. No, I just said, we've got to be an example to the rest of the parish, right? So you boys are on view all the time when you're at Mass. And literally, I'd have a dozen boys at every Mass, every Sunday Mass, You're on view, right? So the way you behave in the sanctuary is going to trickle back to how my parish behaves. So set the example. Don't talk before Mass. Don't certainly talk during Mass. And, do all these other things. Make sure you're kneeling at the right time. Make sure you genuflect properly. And make sure, you show the reverence due to the Lord in the reception of Holy Communion. Little things, but it had an effect. Extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. Some irony here, because one of my jobs in the Archdiocese, the Archbishop asked me to do immediately, was go and train the extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion throughout the diocese, which I've done in the last 8 months. I have seen 2,500 people. I have had 2,500 people on my courses for extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion. What is the irony? I didn't have extraordinary ministers of communion in my parish. Didn't have any. We had a church that seated 400. I had a permanent deacon, and the two of us would be at all the masses, and we'd distribute Holy Communion by ourselves. We didn't distribute under both species. So now I've come here, and I'm training extraordinary ministers. But the thing is that my policy was, if we don't need them, we're not going to use them, because it detracts from reverence towards the Blessed Sacrament, I think. When, not the fact that you've got an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, the fact that you've multiplied their ministry to the fact that everybody is an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion, right? And then you go into all these problems, which I talk about in my course. I arrived in this parish, I had this list of 50 extraordinary ministers, which I'm thinking, I got 3 masses at the weekend. What on earth do you need 50 extraordinary ministers for? And then my parish secretary went through the list with me one day and said, host so-and-so, you'll know her, and she comes to the 10 o'clock, and she's married to so-and-so and all that. And then, a couple of people, you won't know them. I'm like, why? Well, they don't come to Mass here. What do you mean they don't come? They only come when they're on the schedule to be extraordinary ministers. Like, okay, well, that's it. We'll just take them off the list then, shall we, But this multiplication of extraordinary ministers detracts from the reverence towards the Blessed Sacrament, and especially when those extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion are ill-trained and don't have the piety. And this is what we're trying to do in the Archdiocese of Portland now, is to make sure all our extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion are well-formed and they have a piety that is proportional to the great mystery in which they participate. So that's something. But I would say this in the parish: if you're building this Eucharistic reverence, don't give people jobs in the altar for the sake of it, You give to Catholic charities, we're going to make you lead Eucharistic minister. Thank you so much. No. Being an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion is not some sort of reward for service in some other area of the parish. The people that are involved, that participate in a most intimate way in the life of the priest, should be as pious as the priest. They should have the same theological understanding, and they should have the same spiritual life, I hope. I say about the tabernacle, and, in a church sanctuary, I think the church is quite clear about what we need to do about tabernacles things. And in fact, in the Archdiocesan Liturgical Handbook, it actually says in the Archdiocese of Portland, the Archbishop prefers that the tabernacle will be placed in the center, symmetrical center of the sanctuary. So we've gone to that point of saying that the preference in our Archdiocese is to do this. By pushing a tabernacle to the side, or even to some point of the church where you don't know. I went into a church the other day, and I needed a Sherpa to find out where the tabernacle was. I mean, literally, could someone give me a map? This is terrible stuff, because it has knock-on effects to the fact that, and then the priest says, the tabernacle's right over, I can't go. I've got to send someone to do that. I've got to send the lay people to bring the Blessed Sacrament from the tabernacle and repose it because it's such a long way. All these sort of things that go with that. Tabernacles should be in our sanctuaries, and they should be properly reverenced when we pass before the Lord truly present. All this sort of stuff seems silly, but it's very, very true. It has an effect on parish. So the great thing about this parish, I was there 9 years, and everything changed, right? And we were going to write a book. There was that book, Rebuilt. Yeah, well, we were going to write this book called Rebuilt Catholic Edition. And because I read that book, and I'm like, this could be just a Protestant megachurch. But we converted a Catholic parish into a more Catholic parish, So we never got around to writing the book. I had a guy who worked for me who was going to attempt it one day. But the thing that changed this parish around, I'll tell you some of the results, but the thing that changed it was the pastor, because he was awesome. Yeah. It had nothing to do with me. It had to do with our Lord truly present in the Eucharist. That's what changed the parish, right? Because we moved from about 2 hours of adoration on a Saturday afternoon in the elevator lift area of the church. We had an elevator. And the pastor before, when people wanted adoration, said, well, you can organize it. I don't want anything to do with it. And I don't need any more work in my life. And I'm busy. And on Saturday mornings, I'm not going to be there because we didn't have Mass on Saturday mornings. And there was a room at the entrance to the elevator to go up to the church. He said, you can have that room. And the woman said, great, can we have some kneelers? You find your own, he said. And he put a tabernacle in there, and they had the key to it, and they put this tiny little, that monstrance in the tabernacle. And that was it. And they had adoration on Saturday mornings through to the confessions, which, by the way, no one ever came to, so we didn't bother with those much. Well, we changed that, but 2 hours of adoration a week. And this was this beautiful group of people who wanted to adore the Lord for 2 or 3 hours, right? I came and I saw this irreverent and mean approach to our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. And I said to the coordinator of the adoration as such, I said, we're going to move the Lord back to the church, don't worry. So the next week, we got the proper monstrance out and we started having adoration in the church. And this woman, and I will bring her to the Archdiocese of Portland to talk about adoration, of how she did it. This woman, her email address is maryonfire33. Mary was on fire for the Lord in the Eucharist. She then, with my backing, said, can we have some more adoration? I'm like, sure we can. So then she describes it as completing the dots. So then we started doing adoration on Monday after Mass. And then I said, you know what, we'll end with evening prayer at 6:30. How's that? Great. We signed the people up from Monday, 9:30 to 6:30. And then we'd say, okay, in a month's time, let's do Wednesday. Great, let's do Wednesday. Sign the people up Wednesday through Wednesday. And we did evening prayer at 6:30. And then we said, okay, let's do it overnight, Monday through Tuesday, and connect that dot. So we did that. Then we'd have evening prayer again at 6:30 on Tuesday to end that. And then we connected that dot eventually, and then all done until Saturday afternoon. And we didn't have any adoration during Mass and during Sunday morning Mass. And it started again Monday. So we more or less had 24/6 and a half. But within a period of a year, we went from a 2-hour adoration parish to a 24/6 adoration parish. And guess what that does to your parish? It totally transforms, transfigures the parish. And that was it. That was it. Because I tell you what, when you have 150 people committing to come and make a holy hour before the Lord, before the Eucharistic Lord every week, their lives change, their lives of their families change, and your parish changes. It just takes off. And then it has all these knock-on effects, which I'll talk about. But let me just say this about adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. And we're going to write a document in the Archdiocese about this soon, I think. Adoration must be done properly. If the Lord is exposed on the altar in the monstrance, he must have candles, and there must be someone present at all times. This idea that some parishes have, or some dioceses have, of the glass tabernacle, or the tabernacle with doors that the adorer can close if no one else turns up, is not what we expect in the church as adoration. We expect that the Lord is someone is present with the Lord at all times. And so if someone doesn't turn up, guess what? You stay for that extra hour, and that's the risk you take. And it's a beautiful risk, isn't it? You might have to stay for another hour of quiet prayer in front of the Lord. But this idea of, I'm going to go for 20 minutes, close the door, put the veil over this glass tabernacle, is not really what we understand as adoration of the Blessed Sacrament exposed. Adoration should be done properly. Ideally, there should be two people in front of the Lord at all times. So we suddenly then went to this adoration, and we did all the adoration in our church. Because, people say, well, let's put the Lord in the chapel. Well, no, let's put him in the church. That's his house, right? It's the house of prayer. It's for, where he dwells in the tabernacle or exposed. We would go into a little chapel. We had a prayer room next to the sanctuary that we would do on winter nights. Because in Massachusetts, it gets pretty cold. So we would move, after evening prayer, move the monstrance into the chapel for overnight adoration. But I tell you what, coming into that reasonably sized church at 2:00 in the morning on a hot summer's night by yourself in that beautiful, church with the Lord on the altar there, it's a beautiful experience to know that you're in his house, he's present to you, and you're present to him. The adoration program just changed everything. We got to the point where we talked about adoration all the time. At our school, we had adoration once a month for the school kids. We had a little grotto in the schoolyard, and I would take the Blessed Sacrament down there on the first Wednesday of every month. And each grade would take half an hour, and that would be their thing for the month. They would do that. My principal, my assistant principal, my property manager, my business manager, all those who were not teaching as such, took a holy hour. So in my school, you'd say, well, where's Mrs. Russo? And they'd say, she's at her holy hour. And it was one of the best answers I ever got. When I went looking for my principal for something, where is she? She's at the church doing a holy hour. Great. I insisted that the people that could get out, who weren't physically teaching, would go do a holy hour. Even my property manager did a holy hour during the day. We insisted all our staff became adorers, so that they would take hours, either during the workday, which I was happy to give them the hour off, or after work. If they were teachers, most of the teachers would go adoring on their way home and things like this. Just changes everything. When you've got your principal, your assistant principal, your property manager, your business manager, all these members of staff who are adorers in your parish, changes a lot of things. When the kids are exposed in pre-K, to go and spend half an hour with the Lord in the grotto, when the pre-K teacher starts talking to them at that age about Jesus being truly present in the Blessed Sacrament, guess what? Things change in the school. We went from a school that had about 220 kids in it when I arrived to a school that was 275 kids when I left. A school that was losing money when I arrived, which couldn't pay its insurance bills or medical bills for the staff, to a school that had $500,000 in the bank when I left. It changed everything. Not because of my financial skills, because of the Catholicity of that school, because our Lord was the center of that school. We dragged the kids to Mass, and I say dragged because my school was a quarter of a mile away from the parish. When I went there, they didn't go to Mass. They'd have the odd feast day Mass where the kids would come to school. We changed that. The kids went to Mass every Monday morning, and they marched down that high street, and the whole community would stop in their cars and look with awe about 250 kids in uniform going to Mass, and it was a beautiful sight. They went to Mass. They went to Adoration. We started the devotions back in the parish. We started in the parish school. We stopped everything at noon for the Angelus. All these things, they're simple things, And you may get kickback or some pushback from some people. But if you've done the work that I've talked about earlier about employing those who are on fire with love of Jesus Christ, no one's going to complain about that sort of stuff. And the kids don't complain. They like that sort of stuff. They like to talk about Jesus. They like to go and visit Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So, in sort of summary, what happens when you get the Eucharistic Parish? What are the results? Well, as I say, one of the results, or the most important result is this. There is a genuine pursuit of holiness in the parish. There is an atmosphere that people are trying to be holier. They have that prayer conversation with the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament. They have the experience of good liturgy, which lifts them out of this world to the next world. And thus, they have in their mind what's coming next. Heaven. And when you've got in your mind some thoughts about heaven, things change. You want to go to heaven. You want to be with the Lord, here and now, and for all eternity. And that means we've got to strive for holiness. We've got to pursue holiness. And there's an atmosphere of that when you have a Eucharistic parish, when everything is focused on the celebration of the Eucharist at Holy Mass and the adoration of our Lord in the Eucharist outside of Holy Mass. Money. It's important in a parish. I never, in my 9 years, asked anybody for any money. Never. Just hate talking about money as a parish priest. Most parish priests will tell you this. Just hate having to get up there and talk about money or something. I never asked anybody for any money. When I arrived, we had a $380,000 debt in the parish. When I left, I think I left $500,000 of that school and $500,000 in the parish. And that's over a period of 10 years, 9 years, and without asking anybody for any money. They just gave money. And if they saw something needed fixing, they'd come and see you. Here's some money to fix that, please. People who pray more, pay more. Please don't quote me on that, but if there's anything you take away from today, please don't let it be that. But it's true, right? You don't have to worry about money. Worry about the Lord. Worry about your Eucharistic parish. Everything else falls into place. It just does. And this is not just my parish, right? I have a friend of mine who just did more or less the same stuff in his parish, 2 parishes, 2 failing parishes and a school struggling in the inner city in Fall River. Guess what? Just turned it around over the last 5 years, doing the same sort of stuff, putting prayer, the Eucharist, Mass at the center of parish life. It changes everything. High level of participation. We were known in our own diocese that whenever a Cushnet went somewhere, we would take 50 or 60 people with us. Because we'd say, the bishop's having a holy hour for vocations. Let's all go on Sunday afternoon, shall we, at 2 o'clock? Great, meet at the cathedral. We'd take 50 or 60 people who just turn up. There might be 100 people at the cathedral, but half of them will form one parish. Why? They're on fire. They love the Lord, right? They want to pray. They want to pray for vocations. Vocation is another thing. I didn't even write that down here. I got 2 boys in formation. One is going into 3rd year theology. One is in 2nd year college. I've got a young lady who is about to enter the Franciscans at Steubenville in September. And I got a permanent deacon in formation. We had 4 vocations from that parish. 2, we only have 10 seminarians. 2 of them are from this parish. Why? Because of me, because I'm brilliant. Because of it's a Eucharistic parish, because the Lord is the center of our life here. And that's what happens. You get vocations, you get money, you get vocations, you get holiness, you get all sorts of things. Mass attendance obviously went up. And here's the other thing, when you get on fire people in your school and in your parish, other people sort of say, yeah, I need to do that. I need to up my game a bit. I don't want to, if you've got a school environment where not going to Mass on Sunday is just, you understand it's wrong, don't you? Then you're going to go to Mass because you hear this from the other parents, You don't go and watch the soccer game and everyone's joking about not going to Mass. You go to the soccer game at our school and everyone's talking about, didn't see you at Mass on Sunday, Janet. Where were you? This sort of thing. That's the conversations they have. The people who live in a Eucharistic parish have a thirst for more. They want more holiness. They want more devotions. They want processions. They want to witness to their faith in all sorts of levels. It changes the whole thing. In summary, this is just really conversion. The Lord converts his people. If he is given that pride of place as the center of the parish life, then he converts them. They come to him. They convert to him. And that's the Eucharistic parish. And that is what I think we need to do in our diocese and in our parish, is put the Lord back at the center, give him the reverence that is due to him in the real presence. My talk was not about the event of the transfiguration as such, of course. It is taking the meaning of the word as we use it today. To transfigure something means to transform something into something more beautiful or into an elevated state. That's what happens with the Eucharistic parish. We transfigure it. We make it into a more beautiful place for the Lord, into an elevated state of more reverence, of more beauty. And this is what the Archbishop is trying in the Archdiocese of Portland. You know, his mantra is this: he wants a more beautiful, more reverent, more prayerful experience of the sacred liturgy. And that's what we're trying to do. And it starts with reverence towards the Most Holy Eucharist, and that's been part of my work since I've been here. So I would just like to end with pointing to you to, as Father Theo said, the Archdiocesan Liturgical Handbook. And the handbook is a big document. It's 380 pages. But it contains everything that you will be interested in about liturgy. Some of it's quite technical, some of it's sort of academic, but some of it's simple stuff. If you're interested in liturgy and the application of good liturgy in your parish, in your diocese, or wherever, then the Archdiocesan Liturgical Handbook is for you. It's taken us a long while to put this together. I've worked with some of my colleagues in Rome on this, and we think we've put together the definitive sort of handbook of good liturgy. So it's there, it's in book form, and the great thing of it is nowadays is that we will keep this updated as new rites and things are published by the Church, by the United States bishops, etc., or new norms come for our own archdiocese. We have already had many calls asking us to allow other people to use this, which we will, because it's not, it's just what the Church teaches, nothing more. It's not my ideas or the Archbishop's ideas. This is what the Church says about good liturgy, and we've put it all together in one place. So you've got a little postcard there. The Archdiocesan Liturgical Handbook is, as I say, it's a massive document, so we only printed one copy for every parish, and they've got it. But we want to keep it as a live document, so it's a PDF on our webpage, but it's also available as a Kindle book because, people like to read from Kindles, and you can mark things, you can make notes, and it's got that integral dictionary and all these other good features. So we set it up as a Kindle book, and it's available until tomorrow night at midnight for zero cost. It's $9.99 or something, but we did this promotion for this conference. So if you want it, you can just download it free of charge, and I would say do that. And it's not, it's not a thumb turner. You're not going to say, oh, come to chapter 20, I wonder who did that. No, but it's got everything, and you can search on it. You can search what you're looking for. Everything that's to do with liturgy in your parish, in your diocese, etc., is in there. So have a look at that, download it, and I hope it's helpful, and we hope it's helpful for the diocese as well. One more thing. We produced recently a set of videos about how to receive Holy Communion. And these are on our web pages, they're on the internet, they're all over the place. We've had like 20,000 views of these things, which is good. And we're willing to get these out to everybody. We've offered to bespoke them for other dioceses. They've already approached us about this. They're simple 3-minute videos about how to receive Holy Communion. Now, one criticism the Archbishop had was, well, you don't show people kneeling and receiving at the communion rail. Well, you're not the problem, right? People who receive kneeling at the communion rail with a communion plate, you've got it all set, right? We're not going after you. We're going after people that go like this, that people grab the Eucharist, and that sort of stuff. So it's for normal American parishes where we've got problems with receiving the Eucharist. So that's why we didn't put that in there. Yes, of course, we can receive kneeling and on the tongue. But we show really what not to do, which again is just, if we could elevate the reception of Holy Communion, it's the tabernacle chair approach, I'm afraid. Just let's move it an inch every week and we're going to get there eventually. Some people would like just to do it, but it might cause so many problems. But just liturgical application of good liturgy is steady, solid work that starts with you and your prayer life, and then we go forward with our parishes and our diocese and the wider church. So I would like to thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be with you all, and we'll look forward to Bishop Connolly, who's up next.
Well, thank you, Monsignor. We certainly are blessed to have you in our archdiocese, just like Francis Xavier was blessed to have you as their pastor, and to really do a Catholic reform of a parish. Let's pray that all of our parishes go along those lines, putting the Eucharist at the center of our lives and at the center of our parish. The church becoming a house of prayer, that the Mass is the center of our lives as Catholics. Well, you know what? What the pastor does makes a difference, and so calling us pastors to a higher level of holiness in the way we act around the Blessed Sacrament is deeply appreciated. And the change that the Lord will do as we put our centers, as we center our parish and our lives on Him in the Holy Eucharist, truly opening up a path for miraculous transformation. So thank you, Monsignor, for being a bulldozer and a leader in paving those ways of a necessary return of love for Jesus in the Eucharist within the Church.